Hello everybody, thank you for joining us for today's webinar covering practical applications in InduSoft Web Studio. We had some technical difficulties during the actual webinars, so I'm re-recording the video. So if you joined us on the webinar and you don't see something that I did during the webinar, please feel free to let us know, ask questions. I'm going to be posting the application that I develop here along with this recording, so you should be able to download that and take a look at it. If you have any questions, let us know. Also, you're going to be receiving the survey. Let us know how we did, and we'd love to hear from you. And let us also know if you would be interested in participating in a webinar with us. We'd love to have you. Let us know what your ideas are and what you'd like to do, and we'll review that and let you know. But let's get started. Again, this is covering practical applications in InduSoft Web Studio. My name is Scott Courtier. I'm Senior Technical Sales with InduSoft. And where this webinar comes from is several places. We're going to cover basically three areas that I've had a lot of questions on as I've traveled around and presented and done sales demos and things. And a few weeks ago, I did a tips and tricks webinar that covered some similar things to what we're going to show here, but I got a lot of questions about covering them in more detail. And I often get questions on how to do the things that I'm going to show. So I thought I'd make a specific webinar just for this. So what we're going to be covering is recipes, how to use classes in a recipe, and this is going to be retrieving customer postal addresses, but it doesn't have to be an example of just postal addresses. It really can be an example of how to use classes in a recipe. What we're going to be building on is creating an invoice or a billing printout that can be used. And this application, although not complete, we're going to cover the basics of how to trend and customize some trend stuff during the development of this. And then at the end, we're going to do this reporting. We're going to print this invoice in HTML format, include some of the recipe information, include some of the trend information, and embed that right in the report. So that's what we're planning on doing today. And again, if you have any questions, let us know. Send us an email or let us know in the survey of what you'd like to see for future webinars or how we did today. To get started here, we're going to start really with three steps. The first step is we're going to create a class. We're going to create the tags using the class as the type. And essentially what I'm going to do is create a class that's the address structure. So it'll have company name, address, city, state, postal code, and then we'll create the tag. And in fact, in this scenario, what we're going to do is we're going to create two tags that use that class, that address structure. We're going to have a bill to address and a ship to address. And then we're going to create the recipe worksheet to be able to save and retrieve those and then develop a screen to be able to do that. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to create this class. And what I'm going to do is get out of the presentation mode of this PowerPoint and back into the development slide so I can actually copy this. So this is going to be the company address, city, state, zip, and I'm going to copy that. Now I'm going to go back to InduSoft Web Studio and create a brand new project. You can see here that I have a test that I was working on. Well, I might flip back to that if I have problems during the webinar, but we'll do this. We'll name this new project Jumpstart. We'll call this project. Let's call this May 2016, and we'll make this a Windows local interface because that's all we need is just a few tags here. I'll make this my standard resolution on my laptop here. And when we get this going, even before I create a screen, I'm going to jump into the Global tab down here and create a class. Now, if you're not familiar with classes and tags within InduSoft Web Studio, I highly encourage you to look at our training videos that we have online and understand how that works. This is going to be a little bit more of an advanced webinar, give you some good topics, but if you need the foundation, go back and look at our training class. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a class name here. I'm going to call this C address. So that I know this is a class type class, and say OK. Now I'm going to paste that structure in. So I know that I'm going to have members that are company, address 1, address line 2, city, state, zip code. Here in the US we call it a zip code. Most other places they call it postal code. Same idea, and then phone number. Now for all of these are really going to be string type. So I can just go down here. I'm selecting the cell, hitting the letter S on my keyboard, and it jumps me right to the string type. Because after quick analysis, even though in the US most of our zip codes are 5-digit numbers, we've now enhanced that with some extra characters at the end, separated by a hyphen. So it's 5 digits hyphen 4 digits, but because of that hyphen in there, I'm going to make that a string. And if you're doing this with a postal code elsewhere in the world, there's often letters included in there as well. So I'm going to save this class. And now what I'm going to do is go back into the project tags and make the build to and ship to tags out of that class type. So there'll be build to, and instead of being an integer type, you can see here now we have that type that's the class, that C address type. And then the ship to, and I'll also make that the address type. So now we have a build to, and then that whole address structure, the ship to, and that whole address structure. And if I want to get to, let's say, the build to company, the syntax that I would use would be build to dot company or ship to dot company, so I can get at those that way. So now that I've created those tags referencing that class type, so that's this second here, create the tags using the class type. Let's go on to the third step here, which is using classes in a recipe. So what I'm going to do now is make a recipe worksheet, which is essentially the template or the structure for that recipe. And again, I'm just going to copy these just to save a little bit of time so I don't have to type these in during the webinar. I'm going to go back into my development environment, and here under the Tasks tab, open up a recipe worksheet and paste that in. So you can see that that's build2.company, build2.address line 1, address 2, city, state, and zip, phone number, and then I have the same exact thing repeated for the ship to. Now, again, if you want to understand a little bit more, I'm not covering the functionality of recipes. If you want to understand that a little bit more, go take a look at our training videos for that. Or in our documentation, or I think we even have other webinars covering recipe functionality. But the basic idea is this worksheet is going to be the kind of the template or the tags that are going to be saved, and we're going to give that a name. Now, because we're doing an invoice, actually when I did this original demo, I called this a bill of lading. So this is going to be called bill name, and make sure I spell this right, inside of curly brackets or braces. And when I hit enter, it's going to ask me that, hey, that tag doesn't exist. Do you want to create that? And since that's going to be a name that I'm going to enter, I need to make that a string type tag. So I have the bill name in there. I have my structure or my tags in here. Invoice recipe. And we'll close this and save this. And we'll save this as recipe 1. You can give this really any name. It's just going to be used when I call this up in the script a little bit later on. And now I need to build a screen to be able to interface to that. So let's see, we've got that. And eventually what I'm going to do is use these. I'm going to save the recipes, and then I'm going to load the recipes. The first thing that I'm going to do is create some recipes and save them. So I'm going to use this script. Now what this is this is a built-in InduSoft command to save the recipe number 1. And because it has a $sign in front of it, I can use it in the VB script interface. So I'm using a built-in InduSoft script inside of a VB script. And then I'm going to assign the result tag back to a tag called status, so I can see that if that was successful or not. I highly recommend that you do that anytime you do any type of function that gets a returned value. Is take a look at the status, let you know if it completed or not. So again, I'm going to go back to the screens here, and I'm going to insert a screen, and I need a way to be able to enter those addresses. Before I do that, because I have that script copied here, I'm going to put a button on the screen that's going to allow me to save this. So we'll say save, and then I'll go into the VB script and copy that I have in the clipboard there so I don't lose that. And status doesn't exist yet. That's going to give me an integer value back, so I'll make that an integer type tag. And now, again, I need a way to enter those build to and ship to addresses. So I'm going to build this here. I'm going to put a text object on the screen, company, and then give myself some hash marks here or pound signs depending on where you're at in the world, and that would be the number of those hash marks would be dependent on how big of characters you have. Also notice if there's some extra space here, that's because this is a variable width font, and the letter W takes up more space than the letter I, so that it has to account for that space. Notice this when I'm going to copy this over for the build to and the ship to area, make sure that you don't overlap that. Now, I could copy this down numerous times for all the different fields, but before I do that, I'm going to go in and apply the text data link to this. Now, that was the same as going up here to the text data link. It's just conveniently located on that button. I'm going to then put my tag in here, but at the same time, I'm going to also click input enabled. Now what this will do is this will kind of configure this whole object, and when I copy it down, then it's going to be pre-configured, and I just have to change the tags and the caption so that I don't have to do that extra work every time I want to once I copy this down. So for this, I'm going to use the object finder here, and I'm going to build my address as I go, or my tag. So I'm going to select the tag build to, but then here I can dive into the member of that, and it's going to expand that, and the first one here will be company, and click on OK. And so now I can copy this down and now change this to, instead of the build to company, I can change this build to address line 1, and then go back to the text, and what I'm going to do is just copy this part of the tag because I want that to show address line 1 here. I'm going to just be as efficient as I can, and then I'm going to, oh, I swapped those two around, so let's see, make sure that I got this here. Now, I want the company on the top, so we'll just put these like this. And now I want to point out that you don't actually have to use that object finder to create your tag. In this case, I know that it's address 2, so I can just go ahead and type that in. And here, I'll type in address 2, and then copy this down. And the next thing that we want is, I believe, the city. So we'll go back into build to, choose city, say OK, and again, copy this for efficiency's sake. Go back in here, put in city, and we need the state. And after this, change the caption, the zip code, or commonly the postal code, and I don't need to go back in there. We'll just do zip in here. And just to show you that this could be different label than the actual tag. And city, state, zip, and now phone number. And we'll go back to the here and choose that, build to, and there is the phone. Okay, now we'll do a little bit of alignment on here, make sure everything lines up. And put a little label on here since this is the build to. And now what I'm going to do is, because I'm really using the exact same structure, instead of the build to, I'm going to use the ship to tag. What I'm going to do is copy this over here, again paying attention not to overlap with this text here. And then what I'm going to do, change this label first of all to ship to. For convenience, what I'm going to do is temporarily group these items. And the reason I'm doing that is because now I can go into the replace tool, and using the whole tag name here, I can replace that bill to with ship to. And what I'm going to do is highlight this ship, and now I can go down through each one of these and just highlight bill, paste with Control V on my keyboard here, and paste that in. And then once I get down to these last couple here, say OK. And now what I should be able to do is ungroup that, go back into any one of these, and confirm that my tag has changed to the ship to, but left the member, that class member, as it was. So those are essentially duplicates but pointing to different tags. All right, so now what this is going to do, before I get going any further, what I want to point out is when I created this recipe, what this has done is it's saved this recipe 1 in the configuration folder of my project folder. So here I created Jumpstart May 2016. If I go back into my Windows File Explorer and I go down to Jumpstart May 2016, I should be able to go into my config folder, and there's my recipe 1, that template, that worksheet. Now this is not the actual saved values. That'll be a little bit different, and that'll end up being here in the root folder here when I save those, but I just wanted to point this out as we get going here. Okay, so now I'm going to save those, but I need a way to change that bill name before I save. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put text box on the screen and put that bill name in here. And let me make sure that I get that correct, because I don't want to mistype that. It's input enabled. And so now when I save the recipe, let's go back in here. It's going to save that recipe 1 to the disk, and it's going to use that recipe name to save that. So let's go create a couple of fake customers. Before I do, let me close this screen and save it. We're going to save this as main. And now we need to go back in and make sure that that is the startup screen. So I'm going to right click on that, set as startup. And when we run this, I think I have everything here needed to do this. If not, you'll catch me and understand how to troubleshoot. So the company, we'll make this my company. And because I have these out of order, it tabbed to that second address line. This is a good point to bring up here, show you how to change the tab order. I can, because it normally follows the order that you put things on the screen or the Z layer. You can go back and change the tab order. I right clicked on white space, click on tab order, and so now here you can see the tab order. I can make this 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and I'm just clicking on those little yellow boxes. So that will now be the tab order on this screen. And then I guess I can make that one the next one. And so now when I save this and run it, I should be able to go from my company and hit tab, and it'll go right to the next address there. 123 Main Street, and there's no address. City will be Austin, Texas. Postal code 78759. Phone number, and this is the actual zip code and the phone number for InduSoft in Austin, Texas. 3490334. And now we're going to make up a company. We'll call this we'll just call this company 2, and make this a little bit easier to understand. This will be at 456 2nd Street, Suite 100, New York, New York. Postal code, I don't know what the postal code is in New York, so I'm just going to make that up. Same with the phone number. I don't know what that phone number range is. So now we're going to save this as customer number 1, and I'll save that. And so now I'm going to pull the File Explorer back in and show you what's happened. In my project folder, what that's done is save that as customer1.dat. And if I make a second customer here, we'll call the, or a, yeah, actually the, with company 3, and we'll make a different address. We'll make 789 3rd Street. Or we'll even go Ave, and we'll do suite A1. And we'll make this LA, California. And again, I don't know what their zip codes are. And we'll do 456. Make something up here, and then we'll save this as customer 2. And bring this down in. Now we can see we have a customer 2 there. Now we need a way to load these back in as we need to. So what I'm going to do is go back to my PowerPoint, and I have this script already written here. And if you've seen our training videos, you should recognize this script. I'll explain it here in a second briefly once I put it on the screen. What I'm going to do is copy this button over here and change the script and change the text on this script. Oh, this is going to be using a tag called temp, and what it's going to be doing. Let me describe this here. This read file n is an InduSoft script function, and what it does is it pops open a file browser. In this case, because it has a 0 parameter here, it's restricted only to a particular folder, and it's going to pop open that file browser, filter only on the star.dat files or anything that ends with an extension .dat, show me only those, and when I select one of those, it's going to then put the entire path, file name, and extension into a string tag, in this case called temp. So I need to create this as a string type tag. Okay, once I get that, then I use the replace function. Now this is a VB script function called replace, and what it's going to do is it's going to take that tag that I just used, that temp tag up here, and it's going to take the path, and wherever it finds that path, it's going to then replace it with, and right here is quote, no space, quote, and so it will replace it with a blank. And basically what that'll do is strip off the path and leave me only with the file name .dat. Then this next line does the same thing, but it replaces the .dat extension at the end. Notice this is uppercase. If you notice here, our real file extensions are uppercase, so it is case sensitive in that case. That's a Windows thing. This is also going to replace that, and essentially what you're left with is the file name, and that's going to put that in the bill name, and that's how it's going to reference the recipe then. So then we're going to load the recipe using that bill name, and then we'll get the status back. You know, I didn't reference the status when I put it on that save button, so let's go make something to do that. But before I do that, I'm going to change the caption here to show this as load, and then what I'll do is I'll come over here, put another text object, because we're going to use this status over and over again, and that's going to be an integer number that'll come back for most functions, and I'll put that on the tag status here. Okay, so if there's any problems, that'll typically report a non-zero number. So we have a way to enter our bill name. We have a couple of customers saved. Now we got to go back and load them and see if that works. And again, I'm doing this with postal addresses, but I wanted to point out this doesn't have to be postal addresses. This could be however you choose to use it with classes. So again, here I have typed in company 3, and if I want to go back in, that load script that I just put on here, that opens that restricted file browser. It's going to prompt us for these companies or the files that end in .dat. And then when I click OK, it's going to strip off the extension, strip off the DAT, and just leave us with this for the bill name, and it should load that back in. Here we go, company 2. If I want to go back in and load company 3 back in, you can see there. So there's my example of how to use classes within a recipe. And so now if we go back into the PowerPoint, now we're going to jump into trending. Eventually this is going to build, so we're going to save the trends and then be able to embed that in a report. So I have to give myself a way to get to another screen, and normally I wouldn't build this menu right on this screen. I'd build a separate navigation. Just for time, I'm going to put it right here because we're really only going to end up with two screens. What I'm going to do is put on here trend as a caption, but I'm not going to choose the screen that it goes to yet, and I'll show you why in a second. I don't have that screen created yet. And when I do, there's a chance. Oops, sorry. There's a chance that I could possibly name that differently than what I planned. And if I put a different name on there, it's a possibility that it won't go to the right screen. So I'm going to insert the screen. I'm going to put a button on this screen that will take me back to the main screen. And I just copied that other button. So if you wondered where that came from, that was kind of magical. I copied and pasted that, and I'm going to change the command on this one. Since I already have the main screen saved, I can choose it from the list here, and we'll save point this to open the main screen, and I'm going to save this screen as trend. And now that I have that screen saved as trend, I can go back to the main screen and change the functionality of this to then open up that screen. Now, again, the reason why I did this is I could type in here trend, but maybe I called it trends or logging or something different than what I named it. And rather than mistyping it, it's always a good idea to choose it from the list. And in order to get it from that list, that screen had to be saved the first time. So okay, so now I can save that main screen and kind of get rid of that. Now, what we're going to do first is we're going to put a trend on the screen and show you how to customize the scale for each pen. Now, what I'm going to do is put a trend on the screen and a trend object, trend control object. And I'm going to leave myself some space here on the right edge because I'm going to put another trend on there. And the values that I'm going to trend, I'm going to simulate some values. Now, before I do this, I'm going to go create some tags in the tag database. So let's save this screen before I forget. Let's go to Global Datasheet View, and I'm going to simulate a sine wave, a cosine wave, and some random. So I'm going to do SIMULSIN, and we'll make that a real type tag. And then I'll do SIMULCOS. That will also be a real. And then SIMULRND for random. That'll also be a real type tag. And now that I have those tags, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into the Tasks tab and open up the scheduler. Now this is only going to be for simulation of my tags. And the way this is going to work is when I have this event set to clock, it's going to use this time field as a frequency or a period. It's not time of day when you have it set to clock. So the format is hours, minutes, seconds, and then with the clock I can actually go down to tenths of a second, or in this case 100 milliseconds. I'm not going to use the date field, and I'm going to use that SIMUL, and you know what, I don't want to type this, so I'm going to cursor off of this and then double click and pick that simul sign. And I have a little bit of a script off screen here. And what I'm going to do is paste that. Now what this is going to do is take the built-in system tag of analog value and the built-in function pi and generate a sine wave out of that. And I'm going to do the same thing with the tag simul cosine. And again, I have another script off screen that I'm just going to copy to save some time. And then I'm going to generate simul random. And what we're going to do here is take the random function, which is RAND, open and close parenthesis, and then multiply that by 100. That returns a number between 0 and 1. So now multiply by 100. This is going to give us a number between 0 and 100. All right. So those will simulate some values for us. And now I need to put those into the trend itself. So I'm going to double click on the trend, go to points, I'm not going to add a label here, but I'm going to choose again the sine wave, the cosine wave, and the random. And before I forget, when I'm on this here, since I've added three um, tags, it's not going to default to show three tags. I'm going to go here into the legend and say, okay, let's show three of those. And then now I'll get three of those in there. And just to see if this works as is, let's go ahead and run this and let's see, make sure that this should start up in my main screen because I told that was the startup screen. And I should be able to then go to the trend screen and I should get those values coming in. Why am I not getting those values? Why am I not getting those values? The reason is I added the scheduler, but I didn't stop and restart my project. So if I stop it and restart it, then that scheduler will take effect. So it's one of the few times that you actually have to stop and restart your project before that. So now I'm going to get those sine wave, cosine wave, and then random numbers in here. Okay, so I proved that, and again, I didn't put any labels in there. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a way to change these scales during runtime. Now, how am I going to do this? What I'm going to do is I'm going to use a technique that provides a nice little clean interface way to do this. So I'm going to go back on my trend screen, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to create some tags in the points for the minimum scale and the maximum scale, but I'm going to make each one of those an array so that I can have point or pen number 1, 2, and 3. So this will be min scale, and then I'm going to again make this an array. So this will be point 1, and it says that doesn't exist. Do you want to create this? Now that scale I'm going to make be a real, and because I'm going to have 3 of these, it's going to need a placeholder for maximum element number 3. And so then I can just copy this down here and put in 2 and 3. And then I need to do the same thing with max scale. And again, it's going to prompt me for this. I'm going to make that a real type tag and maximum element 3. And if I did any more than just a few of these, what I might do is copy these out to Excel and use Excel's capabilities to extend that numbering and then paste them back in. But because I only have a few of them, I'm just going to manually type those. So now I have a way to tags now in the scales. And notice what I've done is I've referenced each pen as a number. Now what we're going to do is choose those by using a tag. And so I'm going to develop a nice little clean interface, pretty efficient interface way to do that. How am I going to do that? I'm going to use radio buttons. And I'm going to put here pen number 1. And the tag, we'll call this tag selected row, and then the true value for pen 1 will be 1, and that selected row doesn't exist. Now this is going to be the pen number that I'm going to replace inside of those square brackets. Since this is going to be 1, 2, or 3, I'm just going to use an integer for this. And now I'm going to copy this down and change this to pen number 2, and this will have a value of 2. And I did swap these around again. I'm not sure why I'm doing that. Just too early in the morning and not enough coffee, I guess. And then copy this down again, and then change this to pen number 3. And true value of 3. Now that I have those selected, I need a way to change the minimum and the maximum. So what I'm going to do is put a slider on the screen. I'm going to use a convenient symbol out of the symbol library and choose sliders. And I have a vertical slider here that's number 4. And we'll put on here that this is, we're just going to label this with a piece of text, the min value. And here, I'm going to choose that minimum tag that min scale, but inside of it, instead of referencing one of the numbers, I'm going to use the tag. So here I'm going to use selected row as the tag. And so now it's going to, based on which pen I've selected, adjust that particular pen number minimum scale. And I'm going to do the same thing by copying this over, changing this to max, and changing this to max scale index. Again, not a number, but use a tag to reference which one that is. And so now, if I run this screen, I should be able to choose, let's get some values in here, wait a few seconds. And now maybe I'll choose this pen number 2 and choose the maximum value here. And so now you can see that I can adjust that tag anywhere in that range. Okay, and so right there is maximum. And okay, so we can adjust those tags. And now let's say I want to adjust pen number 1. I can do that. And adjust pen min max, and then pen 3. I can do that as well. So you can see that you can adjust these scales on the fly during runtime. So I get that question a lot on how do you do that. So hopefully that answers that question. So here's the customizing scale for each pen. Now we're going to load and save trend configurations. What does that mean? Well, if you have used the trends before, maybe you don't know this, but during the runtime, I can actually customize these pens. So for example, if I want to turn off that middle pen, I can do that. And maybe this top pen, I want to go in and change its properties and make it red and a thick line here. So I can change that. And now let's say I want to make this a different color. So, or maybe, yeah, let's just change this to now green. So I change this to green, and maybe I could change the duration even. So if I wanted to save those configuration, InduSoft Web Studio lets you save those configurations. So let's go make an interface and make a way to do this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into the trend itself, and under advanced, we're going to save this runtime configuration. And to be able to do this in this section right here, again called runtime configuration, I'm going to create a trigger that's going to let me save this. Now this trigger is going to be a tag that only has to change values. When you see the word trigger, it means it has to change, not only from false to true, but it could go from 25 to 26 or 25 to -100, let's say. So it only has to change values. But for this, I'm going to create a tag, a new tag called save trigger, and I'm just going to make this a Boolean type tag because I'm just going to invert it, whatever it is, change it, and that way it'll trigger this. I'm going to make another trigger here called load trigger, and this will then change or load in whatever I choose, and that tag doesn't exist, so let's make that also a Boolean. And now for the file name, I want this to be configurable. So what I'm going to do is off screen I have a what I'm going to put in here. It's going to be the config file name. That's going to be a new tag I'm going to create. And now notice that that is inside of curly brackets. And then outside of the curly brackets is .stmp. Now that's the file format that we save the trend configurations in. And when I create this, this is going to be a name that I use, and this name is going to have to be a string type tag so that I can put a name in it. So here's how this is going to work. I'm going to put a name in the config file name tag, and then I'm going to toggle the save trigger tag, and it will save it to whatever this name is, .stmp. And then when I want to load that configuration back in, I'll have the name in there that I want to choose, and then I will toggle the load trigger, and it'll load that configuration back in. Now I'm going to put it in so I can manually type that in, but what you might want to do is put buttons next to the trend so you can have the the 1 hour view, the 5 minute view, the 1 day view, the 1 week view, or if there's particular views that you want to create for statuses of the machine or a process that you're in, you can create those and save those off based on a particular file name and recall those just on buttons or however you want to do that. So what I'm going to do now is create an interface to be able to do this. And what I'm going to do is first I'm going to put a text box below here. And I'm going to make that input enabled, which by default it is. And I'm going to tie this to that config file name so I can type that config file name in. And then I'm going to make a save button. And we'll go in here and put a button. And this will be save trend config. And I have this script already pre-typed off screen and put this in here. Now what this is going to do is use a VBScript function called input box, and it's going to prompt me to enter a new graph name. I'll put in that name and then it'll do a save as and save it as in this tag config file name. So that's how I'll get that config file name. Then that save trigger, what this function will do is invert whatever that is. If it's a 1, it'll make it a 0, 0 will make it a 1, and assign the value back into save trigger, so that will trigger that to be saved. And then what I need is a way to load that back in. So I'm going to put another button on the screen here. And I would clean up this interface. I'm just kind of randomly doing this as I go along. Load config, and we'll just call that load. And what I'll do is, again, I have a script off screen. Now this is a very similar script to what we used on the recipe screen. Basically, it's now going to pop open that restricted file browser, and it's going to go into the path, but now it's going to go into the web subfolder, which is where these STMP files are going to be stored. And then the result is going to come back into that temp tag. I'm just going to reuse that same temp tag. I'm going to strip off the path, I'm going to strip off the .stmp, and then I'm going to toggle the load trigger, which will load that back in. I guess in this scenario, I really don't need this to be input enabled. That might actually cause some confusion, so we're not going to make that input enabled because the save is going to prompt you for the actual name. This is just going to be a display. So what we can do here is save that, run our project, and let's go into the trend screen here. And as we get a few different pens in here, let's maybe change this first pen to red and make that a thicker line. And maybe make this bottom pen, we'll make this green, but what we'll do is we'll make it diamond markers. We'll make that marker a little bit bigger, say OK. And so what I'll make this is config red, green with marker, say OK. And now what that should have done, if I did this right, is in my project folder in the web subfolder, it saved that STMP file in there. And now let's change this up a bit. We'll make a, we'll change maybe the top line to blue, and then the bottom line will change back to, let's say, black. And maybe we'll make this a 5-minute duration, so this will be hours, minutes, and seconds. So it'll be a little bit more compressed on there. We'll let a few little data points come in here, and you'll see that it'll take a little bit longer to fill up the screen because this is a 5-minute duration. And we'll save this as config, and you can put any name in here that you want to, blue, black, and with marker. And again, you could assign buttons to these to pull these up individually however you want to. I've made this little interface to be able to load these back in as necessary. So here I should be able to go, oh, look at this. We have extra added ones in there. Why do we have added ones? I'll show you in a second, but let's go back to the red configuration. So here's our red configuration, and because this is a real-time trend, it starts over from the beginning every time. If I had a historical trend, it would change those on the fly. Go back in and pull the blue with black in here, and you can see that it changes that, and it even changes duration. So save those configurations, make that really easy to go back in and change during your runtime. Why are those extra ones getting added in there? The reason is in this configuration, in the advanced, you can see here it's set up to auto save, so it automatically saves those. So I'm going to turn that off so I don't get any extra ones in there. In fact, what I might do, and this won't hurt anything, is go into my file folder and just delete those so I don't have those extra added ones laying around. So here you can see that those configurations are saved in there. Okay, so that was what I wanted to accomplish with that. And so let's see. That was saving and loading trend configurations. External manipulation of the trend cursor. Okay, so when I'm running this, let's go back to the runtime. You might have seen me click and I get this vertical cursor here. If I click where there's points, you can see that this cursor value, wherever that crosses, okay, this will be convenient because I can go back to my red configuration here and put my, so I have 1 minute here. I can pause this and I can get those, you can see those cursor values. Now, what I want to show is a way to manipulate this cursor without clicking. Maybe you have a display that doesn't have a touchscreen or a mouse on it, and you want to be able to manipulate this from a PLC value or an external value some way without actually clicking on the trend itself. So what I'm going to do now is go back into the trend configuration here, and under the axes, you're going to see this section here for cursor. Now here is the position of the cursor, 0 to 100%, which 0 is on the left-hand side, 100 is on the right-hand side of the trend. So I'm going to put a tag in here called cursor, and that will be an integer value here. And then I can, below or wherever, I don't have to use a slider like I'm going to use. I could actually use a PLC value to control this. I'm going to put a slider here and tie this to the tag cursor. And again, that's going to be 0 to 100, which is 0 to 100 left to right. So now what I'm going to do is go back into my runtime, and I should be able to get a few points in here. Let's load that red configuration back in. Not sure why I got that in there. Maybe I accidentally turned that off. Let a few points come in here, and now I can move my cursor on the screen and get that wherever I want to. So you can see some values in here, and I can move that and get different values based on where those points are crossing that cursor. So let's see, what's the next thing that I wanted to do here? Let's go back through this, page up. So I saved and loaded those. External manipulation of the trend cursor I just did. How to add tags during runtime. This is a question that I get asked a lot. And now this is a little bit of an advanced topic, and I hope I don't lose anybody here, but I'm going to create a neat little interface and a new trend to be able to do this. So let's go back into the development environment, and I'm going to put another trend object next to this here on the screen. And then what I'm going to do is, let's pull up my stuff here, my script that I have here in the back is, okay. So the first thing that we're going to do is create a way to select the different pens. Now I'm going to put some tags in here, and this is using two different concepts. This is going to use a concept of indirect tags and tag properties. Now for those of you who are not familiar with those two concepts, I encourage you to take a look at the indirect or the tags video the training video that will show you both of these concepts. The indirect tags basically is using the @ sign in front of a tag that will then point to another tag when you give it that name. The second concept is this concept of tag properties. Every tag not only has a value associated with it, but it has a whole list of associated properties. And you get to those properties using this syntax, the minus greater than, and we're going to use the name property and the description property, I think, in this, and we're going to be able to get to those individually. Um, indirectly and add those pens during runtime to this trend. Now, some other convenient properties, just since we're in here, is the timestamp. You can get down to the millisecond the last time the tag was changed, min and max, the bit values if it's an integer tag, and each tag also has the alarm limits associated with it, so you don't have to create extra tags for those as well. So we're going to go create those concepts here, and before we put those tags in there, I'm going to start to work on the interface to be able to do this. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to create a drop-down list of available tags that I want to add possibly during runtime. Now, you can make this dynamic and flexible if you want to. In this case, I'm just going to build the 5 or 6 different tags in here that I want. And so the way this is going to work is I'm going to make a new tag that will receive the name of the tag when I select it. So this will be called selection. And this will have to be a string type because it's going to receive the name of the tag. Okay, and then the position, we'll just reuse that position tag. I'd probably use a different one since I already used position over here, but you'll get the idea. Now the data sources, now this will be an integer. The data sources, it could come from an array tag, static labels that we build into the object itself, a text file, or even a database. So this could become very, very flexible as you need it to be. In this case, since I know what 5 or 6 tags that I want to use, I'm just going to use the static labels and build that list in here. Now, for ease of use, what I've done is I've made this list beforehand, and so I can just copy and paste that. But so this is line 0, line 1, line 2, line 3, line 4, and those are the 3 simulation tags that I created. I'm also going to use the system tag called second and the system tag called blink slow to put in here, and put those in there. Now this is just text that I've put in there. Those are not tags themselves. Those are just a list of text that I'm going to be able to pull, and those will eventually reference the tags that I want to create. Now once I've selected those, I need a way to show those tags. So before I do this, I'm going to go create a couple of text boxes here. Let's see. I want to make sure I get this the right order. What I'm going to do is create a text box here, and what this text box will show will be the tag name, and then I'll create another text box next to it that will show the value of that tag. Okay, and in order to show the tag name, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the indirect reference to the tag property name. So what this is doing by using the @ sign is it's going to use the indirect reference to that and then point to the name of it. Okay, and then what I'm going to do is that will need to be a string because it's going to contain the name of the tag to point to that. And then over here in this value field, what I'm going to do is I'm going to eventually put in the pen configuration, the points configuration on the trend, I'm going to put 3 tags, ltrend point 1, point 2, and point 3. I'm going to show 3 tags in there. And so then this will show the value of that. So what's going to happen? I'm going to select the tag that I want to add. I'm going to put a button here in a second that will then add that indirect address to be able to point to the tag and the value, so we can see those here, and those will be used then in this L point trend 1, 2, and 3 inside of this object. Okay, now the button that I need to add, that doesn't exist, and since I'm going to be putting those real type tags in here, I'll make that a real type tag. Now in order to get this to work, I need a way to once I select the tag, I need a way to get that into that L trend point 1, 2, and 3. So what I'm going to do is put a button here, and I'll just call this add to trend. We'll say add to point 1. And the command that I'm going to do, now this is a script, just a 3-line script, and I'm going to tell you what this is doing here. When I select in this dropdown the tag that I want, that'll be returned in this selection tag. If you remember here, it gets returned right here. Then what's going to happen is it's going to write that to that trend point 1 tag, and it's going to use that indirect, that's what that address, that at sign means. It's going to use the address that this is pointing to, or the tag that this is pointing to, and then put that into the L trend point 1, which I'll have on the pen number 1 here. Then it's going to take the it's going to take the tag property description for that, and then put that into the description for that trend point 1, which we'll get over up in here in the label. So I have that for point 1, and what I'm going to do is just select those 3, hold down my control key so I can copy all of those, and I'm going to go in and change this script for, again I have this off screen just for ease of typing, for point 2, and then I need to go back to the button. That doesn't exist, and again that's going to be a real type tag, and that doesn't exist, so that will be a real type tag as well. And let me just double check because I want to make sure that I didn't do something wrong there. I might need that trend point to be a string, so let me go back here and change that so that trend point 1, we might have to change this here at trend point 2. Why didn't that get caught? We'll see if this doesn't work here. So trend point 1, trend point 2, I think this needs to be a string type tag, and I want to change this to reference the caption of 2, and then I want to change this to be trend point 2, and then this to be trend point 2, and the same thing here. We'll copy this down. I'm running out of room here on my screen, and we'll change the script that's in here. Again, I have this off screen. And change the caption. Okay, so trend point doesn't exist. That will be the string. That's where I messed up before. This one will be the real type tag. And go in here and change this to 3, and change this to 3 as well. Okay, now I need to add those. Let's see, so those trends, or those values are in the tag database, and what I need to do, because I'm using those descriptions, what I forgot to do is in the description field, I forgot to add the description here. So what we'll do is SIMUL SIN and SIMUL COS. Now I'm going to uppercase that just to show you where that comes into play, and SIMUL RND, I'll uppercase that as well. Let's just do this here. N. Okay. And so now what's going to happen is I'm going to select the tag from here, add it, and then it'll reference up here in the tags or in the points, but I need to change this. So that description that I just went in and typed, what that'll do is that'll come into here. Now I just pasted this in from off screen. It'll get that description that reference, that indirect tag reference to point to the description that I just typed in. And then in here, what we need is that tag that's getting its, when I add it in using those buttons. So I can come down here and change this to point number 2. Change this to point number 2. And then we'll add 3. And then I think we're good to run at that point, assuming I did everything correctly here. All right, I think I've got everything. Let's go ahead and run this. So what I should be able to do now is, I have no tags in here yet. I should be able to use that SIMUL sign and add it. So that added that. See where that uppercase came? That came from that description. And I'm not updating here because I forgot one step. In order to get those values to constantly update, I have to constantly cause those to be transferred. So what I'm going to do is in the graphics script, in the on while any graphics, while the viewer is open, I will constantly transfer those. So trend point 1 will go into trend, the reference that, again, that indirect we'll add back in there. So we'll save that and we'll stop just to make sure these changes take effect. And so now I should have, there's that sign in there, and then we can add, let's say we add the random next. So that random will be in the middle, and then we'll add maybe the seconds clock to, and I forgot to change the label on that. So that will constantly step up as we get going on. Let me go change that label before I forget to do that. And I should be able to save this and go back in, and there it is. So I can pick any of those tags, and you can see how those get added into the trend during runtime. I even get the label out of it as well. So that was the primary thing that I wanted to show. So hopefully that explains how that all works. Let me go back real quick. So here's what's happening. I'm selecting from this list, which is the static list that I've put in here. It doesn't have to be. That could come from a database, a text file, things of that nature. When I select that, the text goes in the tag called selection. Then I use this button to then take that selection and put it into the to this tag. I then use the indirect reference to that and put the value into trend point 1. And then I also use that selection description, which I typed in this case in uppercase, to go into the description tag, so that when I use it in here, I get that description in here. Let me fan this out a little bit. I get that tag property of the description, and I get that value. And then I went into the graphics script so that you see the values constantly being dumped in there once I've selected them. So that's how that works, and that's a big question that I get asked a lot. Hopefully that clears up some things. Now I want to do another step here. Let's make sure that I'm on track on my PowerPoint here. Customizing scales for each pen, saving, loading, external manipulation, adding tags during runtime, multiple cursor dumps. So I added the cursor in on this trend. I showed you how to move the cursor around. What I want to be able to do now is add a way to get the values out of this trend at different cursor points. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into the points configuration here, and under options you're going to see the cursor value. Okay, so the first cursor value that I'm going to put in here is going to give me this tag here. I'll put in here this L trend point 1 cursor, and that should be a new tag, and that's going to give me the reel back. And then I'll go into the second one here, and that'll give me, I'll paste that in here, and I got to make sure to change this to a 2. and that doesn't exist. Again, that'll be a real. And the third one here under options, cursor value, that'll give me the third pen back. Now, what I'm going to do is create a neat little interface to be able to dump those out of the cursor value tags into a neat little display. So what I'll do is I'll add a button, and let's see, maybe I'll put this down here, I guess. We'll add a button that will say dump cursor 1. And then below, what we'll do on this button is we'll put a little script here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to create an array called cursor1, and then I'll have 3 elements, and I'll get those individual points. When I press that button, it'll take those points that I just added into the pens and then dump those out into these tags here, and kind of saving those off, temporarily saving those off. So this is going to prompt me when I close this, or I can right click and do a check script. Cursor1 doesn't exist. Those are going to be real type tags. It's going to be a maximum index of 3, and so they say that's okay. And now I need a way to display that, so I'm going to drop a text box down here and show that cursor1 index 1 here. And then I can copy these 3 boxes down and change the tags, the index from 1 to 2 and 3. And then I can copy this whole thing over and change the label on this button to be cursor dump number 2. Go back into the command and change this to cursor 2. And then that doesn't exist. Again, I need to make a real because it's going to receive those real values, maximum index of 3. And go back in here and change this to cursor 2. Hopefully you can see what I'm doing now before I actually demonstrate it, but when we run this, I'm going to have some values in here, and I'll get that cursor on the screen. And now if I want to see what those values are, I can see them here real time, but I can dump those values here. And then I can place a second cursor on the screen. I could pause this, for example, too, and then get second set of values. So this is a way that you can get like multiple cursor dumps if I want to compare values side by side. What happened at this point? What happened at this point? And if I wanted to get the time and date out of this, a way to do that is, let's say that I want the time and date displayed over here. What I can do is put a text box here and cursor time. This is not something that I plan to show. This is kind of freewheeling it here a little bit. So we'll make that a string type tag, and then I'll take that tag, I'll copy that. Now where that value comes from is here under the axes. If I go to the cursor, the value for that is going to be the cursor time. Say OK. And now when I run this, wherever that cursor is, it's going to show me the time and date stamp of where that is on the trend. You can see this time and or date and time down to the millisecond. So if I pause this, you can see where that is, and I could actually store that off too with this cursor dump if I wanted to as well. So that's multiple cursor dumps using the trending. So now let's go on to reporting, and eventually we're going to take the trend and turn it into an image and put it into an HTML report. Let's see. But before that, I want to use HTML to print that invoice. So what I'm going to do is go back to my recipe screen here. And on the recipe screen, now that I have these addresses, I want to create a report. And now what I'm going to do is use the report worksheet here. And inside of here, I'm going to put some HTML. Normally, you would embed tag names inside of curly brackets and maybe put some text for a production report, etc. But what most people don't realize is because HTML is just text, I can put HTML in here. And so what I'm going to do is off screen, I've generated some HTML, and I'm going to paste this in here. Now, I'm not a strong HTML programmer by any means, but what's going to happen here is this is going to set up the formatting for this, and then eventually what you'll see is I am embedding those build to addresses inside of curly brackets, inside of a table, and in addition to that, I'm also putting a logo, and so I need that logo PNG in my project folder. So let me make sure that I go do that. So let me go grab this. So what I have is off screen, I have a place where I have that logo, that PNG logo, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to go grab that. And then what I'm going to do is come back into our Jumpstart May 2016 folder here, and I'm just going to paste that logo PNG. So you can see that's the InduSoft logo, and it's just, in this case, it's just inside of my project folder. So that will appear in this report. And this again is going to be this invoice, or when I did this for a customer, it was called a bill of lading. So I'm going to create this as a bill name, and then when I save this, it'll save it as .html, and whatever the name is in front of that. So I'm going to have to make that tag a string type tag, and so when I save this, not recipe, report1, and it didn't ask me for that bill name, so let me go double check to see what happened there. There's the bill name. I don't think that I've entered that before, so let me just go create that bill name here, and tag already exists. Or where did I create that? I don't remember creating that. Oh, the bill name I created up there when I saved that as the customer here. So okay, so I have that in there, and so now I need an interface or a way to make this report. So what we're going to do is first back here on this screen, we've had a way to select that customer. So let's add a way to print the report. And let's see here. So let's first off screen here, grab my script, and I will say, put a button here, and put this down here as print report. And the script for that is going to be the report function, the InduSoft built-in scripting report function. It's going to grab that report that I just created, that worksheet, and print it to disk. It'll give us status on that. So let's see how that works here. And save this, run my project. And I've got company 3 in here, so let's then go print that report. And now I'll pull this in from off screen. What that's done is it's created that customer 2, because that's one I had selected for that bill name, customer2.html, and I'll open this up in a browser. Now this could be embedded as an ActiveX object right in your InduSoft application. You could put a web browser ActiveX object or .NET object right in your application. You don't have to do this externally. And also you could create a function that would turn that into a PDF as well. So here's the that logo, and then there's a couple of tags that I don't have defined, but here you can see that it put in those tags right in there, and it turned this into an invoice. So now the Now you can be very flexible and get whatever type of reports that you want to and just build that up in HTML. Real good excuse to learn HTML and create some really nice looking reports out of that. So what's the next thing that I wanted to do here? Time stamping the report name. Okay, so what I've had customers ask is, I don't want to overwrite my reports. I want to put a timestamp right in the name of the uh, report. So what I'm going to do is, not in the recipe, sorry, in the report, is instead of just using the bill name, what I'm going to do is off screen, I actually have a format of this, and I'm going to copy this and paste this in here. Now what this is actually doing is it's taking the bill name, and with the plus sign, I'm appending, in this case inside of quotes, an underscore, and then a plus sign, and I'm appending the system tags year, month, and day, and then another underscore, the hour, the minute, and the second, and then closing that curly bracket .html. So now when I save this, if I run this again, in addition to the name, so let's change this to back to customer 1, and so here you can see it's company 2 actually, and now when I print this report, it'll come out with the bill name, the today's date, which is, and again, I mentioned that I recorded this after the webinar, so this is May 26, 2016, and it's 9:49 in the morning, 25 seconds, and if I open that up, you'll see that report in HTML, so that's how you can embed that. And in a similar way, what you could do is put in a project folder inside of that convention here, and change your folder. So some people might want that to go to a reports folder inside of your project. So that's how you can do that. The last thing that I wanted to do here is embed a trend image into the HTML report. So what I'm going to do is go back into the trend object here, the trend screen, I should say, and then into the trend object. And here under advanced, here's a section to export to a file. So the trigger that I'm going to choose here is, I'm just going to call this trend export. And again, that's a trigger that I'm just going to make a Boolean. And then the file name, what I'm going to choose is a built-in scripting function called getAppPath, which is going to be the path of where my project is running. And then I'm just going to save this as trendoutput.jpg. And I'm going to keep that name consistent. Notice that that name isn't changing. That's so that I can find it with the HTML. And then the status, we can put in there. In this case, I'm not going to use the status. Say OK. And so now what I need is a way to then save that or export that picture. So what I'll do, and again, I'm putting buttons here on the screen, but this could all be done with either PLC addresses or scripting or scheduler or however you want. It doesn't have to be with buttons. So I'll export the trend, which I'll have to do before I print my report, and then the function that I want to do on here will just toggle that trend export tag. And here we'll go back, I'm sorry, go into here, and that I'm going to use this filtering mechanism to type T, which will get me just to the T's. There's my trend export. This will toggle that tag. And what's it going to export? It's going to export, once I toggle that, it's going to put the trend output.jpg in my folder, my root folder of my project, and we'll save that. And I need to add one more thing. Back in my reports, I need a way to embed that into my report. So what I'm going to do is add one line to my HTML, and I'm going to put that in between the two tables here, between my bill to and ship to. And what I'll do is I'll just put this one line in here to make sure it's a little bit readable here. So I'll include that image with no border, and the file will be trendoutput.jpg. And when I embed that, Now, let me make sure I stop this and I run this. What I'll do is go to make sure I have a customer in here. We'll load in customer or company 3. And before I print my report, I'm going to get some values into my trend here. And maybe I'll change this to red so it's a little bit dramatic. And again, a thick line. And maybe change this one to green. All right, and now that I have some values in here, I will export that trend. So what that's done, if I go back into my folder here, it's created this trend output.jpg, and move this off screen. Now I can go back and print my report. Notice it's company 3. Print that report, and I can come back in here, and so this was my new report that I just generated. Notice that it's got the time and date stamp in it here, and when I open this up in my browser, you should be able to see not only the report, looks like I put it in the wrong place. I wanted it in between these two. Let's go move that here real quick. I want to put it in between these, so looks like I didn't get it in the right spot. So let's go back in here, my reports, and I put that in right here, but I actually wanted it down here. And save this, run this, and go back into my trend. We'll just let a couple of points show up in here. Notice that I'm just going to leave them black this time so that you can see that there's a difference. And go print my report, and go back into my here. So this is a new one here? I think so. And there it is. Still not in the right spot. Anyway, you get the point that the whole idea that I wanted to embed a graphic, and it doesn't have to be a trend graphic. It could be any graphic that you wanted to. So now you can get some really fancy HTML type reports. So with that, I think that's all I wanted to do in the webinar here today. Hopefully this was good information for you, and we didn't really have any questions during the webinar. A few little comments and some good feedback. If you'd like to ever participate in a webinar with us, co-host with us, we'd really appreciate that. Let us know. And if you have any questions on this, you should also take a look at, I'm going to be posting this project that I created along with the video. You should find that as well. Find that on the InduSoft website. And if you have any questions, let us know. Give us feedback on the survey. We're going to be sending you a survey. Let us know how we did. Let us know what you'd like to see in the future. We've got quite a few webinars pre-recorded. Check out our website. And if you fill out our survey, we'll send you a free t-shirt just for joining us today. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and end it. Really appreciate everybody joining, and thank you very much. Have a great day.